two founders of OneWorks, together with Giulio. We know each other since a very long time. We were actually students together at Polytechnico and graduated together in 1986.
My name is Giulio De Carli. I'm one of the two founders of OneWorks.
My name is Leonardo Cavalli.
And this is the Architect Series.
I've been a managing partner for almost 20 years now of OneWorks. But I was the founder, along with Leonardo Cavalli, of a firm dating back to when we were fellow students at the Polytechnic, some 40-odd years ago.
We founded OneWorks with the idea to have a large practice. I couldn't say that this was a business idea. It was more of a desire that we shared.
We built up a team that until around 2007, more or less was made up of several different organizational outfits operating between Milan and Venice, with different names and types of company structure, but all driven by an overriding characteristic, a passion for complex building and infrastructure projects.
I think there's two words which I would like to sort of use to describe this. One is appropriateness. Appropriateness of projects responding to the needs of the client, but not just the client, of course, and the stakeholders and the communities we're working with. The other one is, I guess, familiarity. I think we're not a signature firm, so we're not recognized by any kind of specific language in architecture, but we believe that we're trying to build a degree of familiarity across our projects, which is what we're trying to foster across the whole office. Public spaces as catalysts of our projects. I think this is our very core. If you want to describe this as a sort of strategy, general strategy for the office is to look at the convex space. So the space which is in between and not necessarily the single objects of the buildings. And I think CityLife is very much about this.
The
CityLife Square is the focal point, the beating heart of this new business district concentrated in the three towers by Zaha Hadid, Isozaki, and Libeskind. The original idea was to have a small central forum linking the two levels making up the CityLife Square. Instead, we decided to broaden out this central area and connect the two squares, the institutional square and the below-level area, onto which all the retail outlets at the foot of the business towers open out.
The first thing we did was to take away GLA, or surface making money, producing rent. So we suggested to actually have less square meters than what was the original plan. And then we decided that some of the materials we were using, with even some of the design decisions, were based on a very civic idea of architecture. So we used cobblestones, which is standard way of building public spaces in this country. The way the lighting is layered and organized is actually the same system that Milan uses in every other street. So we try to bring into CityLife, which is very much related to a very contemporary idea of architecture, some of the civic values which are strongly related to both spaces. Public spaces are for everyone. Buildings tend to be for a specific group of people and done for specific purposes, whereas public space is just open to anything.
Bergamo Airport boasts extraordinary features in terms of the concepts underpinning this urban and regional infrastructure. We were tasked with finding a solution able to manage heavy traffic loads within a small infrastructure. We devised solutions to minimize the impact of traffic flows on both volumes and surface areas, remodeling the existing infrastructure. We worked on developing a master plan with the airport management company that prioritized the upgrade of what we call the existing functional assets of the airport. So ours was a program of joining together and enlarging the existing infrastructure alongside other highly complex projects involving inserting structures into existing spaces used every day by passengers. So, while very complicated operations, also in terms of construction, they really optimized the existing infrastructure's capacity and performance, and added spaces and volumes to what already existed in a functionally integrated way. Obviously, this references the values we always abide by in everything we do, along with our focus on the architecture and the juxtaposition of old, restructured structures and new volumes within a homogeneous envelope made of state-of-the-art materials, offering functionality, luminosity, performance, and quality internal and external spaces.
Venice Airport is one of the most important and iconic projects for OneWorks.
Just imagine what it means to work on an airport that's a gateway to one of the most iconic places in the world, the Venice Lagoon, just a few kilometers from the bell tower of St. Mark's Square and the island of Torcello.
We came to a conclusion together, our client, that the most important thing was to keep the strong identity of the current terminal building.
On the one hand, we focused on concentrating spaces to develop a high-capacity passenger terminal in terms of traffic volumes, but with a minimal footprint in terms of the physical structures involved.
We identified this really particular shape of the roof, which is this triangular shape of the roof, which recalls the old buildings of the Repubblica Marinara of Venice, such as the Arsenale. And there is a name, which is the Gaggiandre. So we took this pattern of the existing terminal and we extended it to the new expansion of terminal building towards north and south.
The extension we created ties in with the idea of intrinsic sustainability, which is implicit in the way we design, and was here the starting point of what has become the most iconic space of the whole airport, and for us, a flagship project, which, in our project showcase and catalog, is much admired throughout the world, that is the Galleria.
We always push our projects to try to implement as much as possible natural lights. And it's so more important, I think, and challenging as well in a so large-scale building as airports. The roof is made by modular square units 2x2, which recall the ceiling of the ancient Venetian palace.
The gallery was developed by simply covering an interstitial space between the existing terminal and the two-level road system. We just made use of a space that was already there. We simply redesigned the spatial functionality by redesigning the circulation route on the ground and upper levels, and covered the space with this glazed vault. So we didn't add a single square meter, but made sure that the new space uses everything that was there.
Yes, because there is the line. So in the presentation that is written, there is an underline. Okay, yes. Okay.
When designing the high-speed railway station and the terminal expansion, one of the main goals was to create a new dynamic hub that should catalyze growth and region dynamics.
The airport of Riga is on a Baltic corridor, a railway over 800 kilometers long that will link the Baltic republics from the northernmost part of Finland to the heart of Europe. As it will pass through the airport, this high-speed railway will create what is technically known as an intermodal hub connected to a major airport.
The architectural design of the railway station at the airport wants to maximize the natural light and natural materials. One of the iconic elements is the canopy that is composed by vertical wooden elements, and the inspiration to this element was taken from the vast forest and the shores of the Baltic Seas that also drives to the main gesture of the envelope that reveal the entrance of the station with the wavy facade. The new terminal expansion was done with a building information model system. The team was multidisciplinary and located in Italy, Switzerland, and Latvia. During the design process, this gave the opportunity, despite the distance, to work really connected one each other, delivering a fully integrated design. The glazed facade, the natural light, and the visual were some of the aspects that drive our design. We studied a solution with the glazed facade that runs around all the perimeter of the building, and that together the skylights in the roof brings the light inside the building. To enhance the comfort of passengers, avoiding any discomfort deriving from glare, for example, we studied also a sun shading system.
The Mykolaiv project was initiated by the UN organization, UNICE, at the Forum of Mayors, when it was decided to launch a pilot master plan for the rebuilding of one of the most bomb-damaged cities that will face the complex prospect of reconstruction in the future.
So the concept master plan is a series of strategy that cover several disciplines, because we do know that cities are complex systems, and even more so if a city is going through a conflict and or major economic changes, as is the case for Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv used to be a famous shipbuilding center for Ukraine. They used to produce vessels of all types and used to be an exporting port, one of the most important ones for Ukraine and the Black Sea region.
The plan, in fact, aims to provide urban development indications and also serve as a possible model for cities not in need of reconstruction, but in need the same things. In other words, a vision.
When we started the project, we had the luxury of having access to an incredible amount of data related to the desires of the local population. Taking back ownership of the river for Mykolaiv was really a priority. Mykolaiv is renowned as the city of two rivers because actually it benefits from two rivers, not even one. So one of the key themes of our master plan will be freeing up some of this space to give it back to the people, to allow connection, interaction, and a sort of fruitful and active use of this riverfront in terms of water sport, just walking around from one part of the city to the other, even to make the community feel much more connected with itself and with the nature surrounding the city.
The bridge is actually the name given by the landlords. It wasn't really called the bridge at the beginning of the project. I believe this to be a very interesting project for us is looking at three different buildings. The front building in front of the theatre, the Alferme Theatre, is early 60s office building. And the building to the back was built in the 80s. And again, it was an office building. And then we had another little part, which was actually end of the 19th century, built originally as a house, which was then turned into, again, an office building. At the beginning, the client came with a very open question. What do we have to do with that? So we looked into it, and they were actually thinking, because the market was very high already, whether the complex could eventually be turned into housing development. So I believe one of the very first sustainable decisions was to actually convince the client that maybe housing wasn't the right thing to do, because to actually do the housing, we should have knocked the thing out and build it again. So the very first sustainable pillar of the project was, right, let's retrofit the existing buildings and change the sort of overall idea of the architecture, keeping some of the elements. Eventually, I believe that we were actually able to build a complex where the garden in the middle is the very common space, but buildings are having specific relationship with the context. This was this kind of idea, but it all started with the decision not to change the land use of the building as it was first requested by the client.
The San Marino Outlet experience was inaugurated in 2021. It's an innovative outlet project built on the slopes of Mount Titano, a suburb of the ancient city of San Marino, in a very important urban and landscape context.
We developed outlets on the hill, and we decided that this was a character we should keep within the project. And it was actually the hardest decision ever with a client. I think it took us probably 6 months to convince the client that that was a good idea. But we sort of discussed with them the idea that to actually understand the context and have a more natural relationship with our visitors and clients, the idea of keeping the slope was actually very appropriate.
We had to adopt a different mindset here, since we usually think of an outlet as a building typology occupying large surface areas on a flat site. Here, the plot was on a hillside, so we had to develop vertically in order to be able to contain all the required functions on the same site, starting with the shopping arcade that banks up against the hill, as it were, stretching out along inclined planes, whose gradients range from 2 to 3% and reflects what normally happens in an urban context and the main shopping streets of a town. The facade design was very important as a way of giving the outlet a more contemporary look. In fact, it was the starting point of the whole project. We sought especially to articulate the volumes so that no facade was ever the same. This was achieved using materials, which overlaid with different patterns, colors, and varied layering of solids and voids, allowed us to lend a dynamic, contemporary appearance to the facades themselves. The main facade materials were a stone resembling a local stone used to build San Marino's historic palazzi, and aluminum, which allowed us to pick up the colors of the surrounding natural landscape. Energy efficiency was definitely a key focus. A large photovoltaic plant was built that supplies around 40% of the energy requirements of the communal sections. Great attention was also given to collecting and reusing stormwater to irrigate the green areas and for all other non-drinking water requirements.
The key feature of the San Marino project is accepting the context as a value and an opportunity rather than a difficult fight to take against it. Our project in San Giovanni in Laterano is, of course, very relevant to us, but I guess is a very relevant place of Christianity. San Giovanni in Laterano is actually the second most relevant destination for the Jubilee after St. Peter.
So when we were given the commission to design the new piazza in front of San Giovanni, we had to start with the church itself. We went to visit the basilica, and we were just enamored by the fantastic architecture and the richness of detail in the building, the ceilings, the walls, but most dramatically the floor.
The idea is, how do we keep these spaces available for big crowds, but at the same time let them work when the crowd is not there?
We thought, wouldn't it be beautiful to bring that spirit and that energy of the floor, just extend it out of the church and bring it into the public space? So that was one driver. The other driver that we thought about in Rome was the importance of water and how water has played a role in shaping public space in Rome, really since its beginning. If you think of the River Tiber and how the city built around that.
The fountains play a big role. They are a playful place where the everyday life can happen for children and anybody else, but it's also introducing this idea of multiplying the degree of magnificence of the facade of the church and the buildings around.
We wanted to use the water in a way that's not just for play and joy, but it actually can create a cooling effect. So on those really hot summer days that Rome has, the kids can come out and play and really enjoy water. In a way, it's tactile sustainability. You can feel the environmental improvements, and it brings a certain level of joy. This is a project that's really been near to us here in the studio. I think it's been with us for nearly 10 years now.
It's a very long boulevard, pedestrian boulevard, which is connecting the high-speed station, which is Foster's design, to the Kaaba, which is the sort of destination of the Muslim pilgrimage.
So what we had done was to study the pedestrian simulations that had been performed to ensure that people are moving through in the most efficient way. And what we discovered through that was the way that people flow and the most efficient way to move people around obstacles kind of generated a very fluid design. We thought to kind of convey that through this idea of these lines that you see in the paving. For us, the aim was to find a way to be, on one hand, homogeneous, and on the other hand, diverse. What we did to achieve that was we introduced these shade canopies inspired by traditional Islamic vaults, which are called muqarnas. We used a very light material, steel pipe and mesh, and we created this kind of vaulted structure that became the canopy.
I think the major challenge we had is, again, about topography. There's a difference in levels between the two ends of the two destinations. And the big discussion with the clients was, well, do we have steps or do we have a slope? It needs to be a sort of automatically understood by everybody. So the idea was to go to a slope, not to sort of introduce any element of disturbance across the journey. Because the whole thing is, how do we make a space which is sort of familiar to the one who's coming for the first time to this place? So again, we go back to familiarity.
Beh, questo edificio nasce negli anni 50 come sede, come autofficina della Fiat e della Topolino in particolare. Questo è anche uno spazio molto bello, con anche la luce dall'alto. Quando l'abbiamo visto non era esattamente così, insomma, abbiamo solo cercato di aumentare la luce che entrava, questo è quello che abbiamo fatto.
Mi ricordo che quando ci siamo trasferiti qui, la preoccupazione di tutti, venendo da uno studio che aveva finestre come tanti locali a piano terra, accesso al cortile, come non ha finestre, perché qui non ci sono finestre, e quando tutti hanno scoperto la luce naturale qui dentro, è diventato veramente uno spazio raccolto, con tutto il vantaggio della luce artificiale e nessuna dispersione all'esterno, quindi qui c'è una grande concentrazione.
I guess understanding innovation and also the specifics of architecture is really our role. What needs to be flexible, what needs to be innovative, and what needs to actually survive any of the ideas that we might have. So how do we allow this degree of uncertainty in our design is, to me, the most innovative thing we have to think about. What is the relationship between what will change and what will stay, and how what will stay will actually change or influence what will change, is really where we are working on.
The challenge for us is to understand the complex relations these changes entail and to put together a team that Leo and I are part of. We work side by side with many young architects and engineers who make up our firm. And with these architect and engineer colleagues, we try every day to understand the complexity of what's around us and how to tackle projects.
I truly believe that also architecture has grown into a stage where complexity needs a degree of size and organization. And the single architects need to play a role, very relevant role, but understanding that they will play the role within a larger organization rather than trying to be a solo architect against the world.